Jason thought the nights were finally peaceful, until his German Shepherd began waking up at every tiny sound his 3-year-old daughter made. A soft cough, a quiet breath, a shift in the blanket. Hunter would jump to his feet, rush to her door, and stare into the darkness as if he remembered something Jason didn't. No one understood why the dog refused to let the little girl sleep alone. Until the night everything went silent, and Hunter made a choice that saved her life. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Rain tapped softly against the small house, folding the world down to 4 walls, a short hallway, and one room where a child slept. Jason Miller was 34, but the heaviness in his shoulders made him feel older. Short brown hair, a light shadow of stubble, a gray t-shirt and dark jeans still dusty from a long day of electrical work. He moved quietly, as if noise might wake something heavier than sleep. In the back bedroom, his 3-year-old daughter, Lily, lay in a narrow bed against the wall, blonde hair on a faded pillowcase with cartoon clouds. Her breathing seesawed, light, then heavy, then catching for a moment. In the living room, the German Shepherd lay on the rug, head on his paws. 5 years old, black and tan coat, solid frame, a worn brown collar around his neck. They had named him Hunter only a week ago, yet when Jason said the name, it already felt familiar. The woman at the shelter had called him well-trained, a good fit for families, especially gentle with kids. Jason had watched her talk, but his attention had settled on the dog's eyes, on the stillness there. Lily had toddled over, hands unsteady, and Hunter had lowered his head, letting her fingers disappear in his fur. She had giggled, and the sound had gone straight through Jason. A dog who needed a home. A little girl who needed someone bigger than her father's 2 hands. It had seemed simple. He'd signed the papers and driven them home, telling himself it was a beginning he might actually get right. The first time Lily coughed that night, it was such a small sound, Jason barely heard it. Hunter did. One moment he was flat on the rug, the next he was standing, nails clicking on the floor, body leaning toward the hallway. Another thin cough drifted from Lily's room. Hunter walked forward, not rushing but certain, and nudged the bedroom door with his nose until it opened wider. Jason followed, more curious than worried. The nightlight painted soft gold on the walls. Lily lay on her back, chest rising in uneven little waves. Hunter stood close enough that his breath stirred the blanket. His head tilted, ears pitched forward, listening like someone counting. When her breathing settled into a softer rhythm, he lowered himself beside the bed. At first, Jason found it sweet. "You're already attached, huh, buddy?" he whispered. The next night, it happened again. A small cough, barely more than a sigh. Hunter rose. He went to her door, then to her bed, and did not lie down until Lily's breath evened out. As the week passed, the pattern deepened. Whenever the baby monitor clicked on and the lights went off, Hunter's muscles tightened. If Jason tried to call him back, the dog would obey for a few steps, then drift down the hallway again, drawn as if by an invisible line. More than once, Jason woke before dawn and found Hunter pressed against Lily's bed, eyes bright in the dark, listening to each small, uncertain breath. He told himself it was just loyalty. Yet sometimes, when the rain eased and the whole house seemed to hold its breath, Jason would stand in the doorway and watch them. Lily, restless, turning her face into the pillow. Hunter, fully awake, body tense in a way that did not belong in this quiet room. There was a waiting in him, an old kind of worry that had nothing to do with this house, this father, this child. Jason could not explain it, but the feeling settled in his chest all the same. These were not the habits of a dog simply being sweet. They were the reflexes of someone, some soul, however you wanted to name it, who had already learned, in some other night and some other crib, what it meant to be too late. Wind brushed against the house in slow, restless waves, the kind that made the walls creak and the lights hum as if the night itself were holding its breath. Jason Miller stood at the sink, sleeves pushed to his elbows, warm water clouding around his hands. 34, with tired muscles and a day-old shadow of stubble, he looked like a man trying to outrun the weight of his own thoughts. The dishes clinked softly, a familiar rhythm in a quiet house. Upstairs, his daughter slept, or so he prayed she did. Lily, small and pale, only 3 years old, curled beneath a blanket printed with little blue stars. In the hallway below, the German shepherd lay by the stairs, big frame still, ears alert. Hunter had been on edge all evening, pacing, glancing toward Lily's room as though something tugged at him from the dark. Jason noticed, but exhaustion muffled the warning. He rinsed a plate, breathed out, and told himself the dog was just adjusting. Then came the sound, a sudden sharp scramble of claws on wood. Hunter shot up the stairs like a struck match, the force of his barking shaking the air. Jason froze for half a second, the kind of stillness that comes before fear truly wakes, then wiped his hands on his jeans and ran after him. He reached the landing just as Hunter threw his weight against the bedroom door, voice breaking into hoarse, desperate cries. "Hunter!" Jason snapped, breath hardening with irritation, but when he opened the door, the irritation disappeared. Something colder took its place. The room glowed faintly with the small nightlight on the dresser, but the peace he expected was not there. Lily lay on her back, her little chest still, far too still. Jason's heartbeat slammed against his ribs. The world shrank to the size of the bed. He lifted her, feeling the alarming softness of her body, the absence of breath where breath should be. His phone trembled in his hand as he dialed 911. The screen blinked a warning, 5% battery. The signal stuttered. His voice cracked. The operator answered, calm but distant, guiding him through steps his mind barely held on to. Hunter stayed close, shoving his nose against Jason's arm, urging him forward, refusing to let panic win. Jason positioned Lily on the carpet, hands shaking so badly he could hardly control them. The first compression felt useless, the second, hopeless. He heard himself whisper, "Please, please," though he didn't know if he was pleading to God, the dog, or the small, fading life beneath his hands. Hunter circled them, howling in long, low tremors, sounds that came from some deep old memory he couldn't name. Jason kept going, breath ragged, sweat cold on his back. Time stretched into something cruel and uncertain. Then, just as his strength pulled thin, something shifted. A tiny, weak cry escaped Lily's lips, soft but real. Breath wavered back into her body like a timid guest returning after a long absence. Jason broke, folding over her with relief, flooding through him. And beside him, Hunter's legs gave out. The big dog's body trembled, his chest rising in frantic bursts. He lowered himself to the floor as if the fear had drained the strength from his bones. His head rested against Jason's knee, breath coming fast, eyes wide with a pain and gratitude no words could hold. For a long moment, the three of them stayed like that. Father, daughter, dog, bound together in the stillness after terror. Jason held Lily close, feeling the fragile warmth returning to her skin. Hunter drew one shaky breath, then another, until his body settled. Jason touched the dog's head with a trembling hand. "You saved her," he whispered, voice breaking. The room remained quiet, save for the soft sound of breathing, Lily's, small but steady, Hunter's, uneven but alive, and Jason's, filled with a promise he didn't need to speak aloud. He would not doubt the dog again. Not after this night. Not after hearing silence return to breath. Morning light drifted into the house like a thin, fragile hope, soft, quiet, almost afraid to touch the floorboards. Jason sat beside the hospital bed, elbows on his knees, hands hanging loosely between them. 34, but the night before had added years to his face. His gray t-shirt was wrinkled, damp in places from where he had wiped his eyes without meaning to. Lily lay in the small white bed, a tiny figure under pale blankets, her blonde hair fanned across the pillow. Her breathing was steady now, steady enough, but each rise of her chest felt like a miracle Jason wasn't sure he deserved. Near his feet, Hunter lay curled in a protective arc, big frame pressed to the tiles, black and tan fur rising in slow, cautious breaths. The dog's eyes stayed open, watching Lily as if expecting the world to turn wrong again at any moment. A doctor entered quietly. Dr. Samuel Reed was in his early 50s, tall and a little stooped from years of leaning over small patients. His white coat hung loosely over a light blue shirt. His voice, when he spoke, had the calm weight of someone who had seen both grief and grace in equal measure. He pulled a chair close. "Mr. Miller," he said gently, "your daughter experienced a sleep apnea episode. Children her age can struggle without warning." He looked at Hunter, then back at Jason. "If your dog hadn't acted when he did—" He let the sentence rest unfinished, like a truth too heavy to set down completely. Jason swallowed hard, nodding, though his chest tightened with the echo of fear. The doctor explained the condition again, slower this time, making sure Jason absorbed every word. When he finished, he softened his tone. "Dogs like yours, some of them sense things machines miss, especially if they've lived through trauma before." Jason didn't answer right away. His gaze moved to Hunter, who hadn't shifted since the doctor walked in. The dog's ears twitched at every small sound from Lily's breath. His body, though still, felt ready, like a guard who refused to step away from his post. When visiting hours ended, Jason carried Lily to the car, her small body warm against his chest. Hunter climbed into the back seat without needing to be asked, sitting tall, eyes fixed on her the entire ride home. Back in the house, Jason placed Lily gently on her bed. The room was quiet, familiar, yet somehow changed. Hunter settled immediately on the floor beside her, head between his paws, eyes open and alert. That night, Jason set up the new monitor the doctor insisted on, adjusting the wires, checking the display, trying to trust the blinking lights. But deep down, he already knew. No machine could match the dog now lying at Lily's feet. He turned off the bedroom lamp. The room dimmed into soft shadow. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The house breathed around them, wood contracting, pipes cooling, wind brushing against the siding. Jason sat in the doorway, watching the two of them. Watching how Hunter's ears lifted with every change in Lily's breath, how the dog's chest tightened whenever her exhale came a little later than expected. A week later, the truth arrived, like a quiet revelation. It happened past midnight, in the still space between one heartbeat and the next. Lily stirred, not a cry, not even a cough, just the slightest hitch in her breathing. The monitor stayed silent. No alarm, no warning. But Hunter rose instantly. His body snapped from sleep to readiness in one sharp motion. He placed his paws on the edge of the bed, nose near Lily's cheek, testing the air, listening with an intensity no human ear could match. And then he barked, loud, urgent, a single note that cut through the night. Jason rushed in, heart pounding, and saw the monitor blink to life only after Hunter had already sounded the alarm. The dog stood firm, eyes never leaving the child. In that moment, something inside Jason settled, not with fear, but with understanding. Hunter wasn't guessing, he wasn't reacting, he was remembering. Somewhere in his quiet, wounded history, he had learned the shape of danger long before machines could measure it. Jason knelt, resting a hand gently on Hunter's back. The fur beneath his palm was warm, trembling with devotion. "You're not just protecting her," he whispered. "You're carrying something I don't fully know." The room was still, Lily's breath steadied again, and Jason felt, deeper than certainty, that he and this dog shared a promise now, an unspoken pact to keep the little girl safe, no matter how dark the night became. Evening light settled low across the house, turning the wooden floors the color of old honey. The air held a quiet warmth, the kind that softens the edges of a long day. Jason knelt beside the bathtub, sleeves rolled, hands steady despite the ache in his chest. Water shimmered beneath the dim bulb, and Hunter stood patiently within it. 5-year-old German shepherd, black and tan coat dampened into darker shades. He didn't resist the bath. He rarely did. Instead, he watched Jason with calm, knowing eyes, as if he understood more of this world than life had ever given him credit for. Jason dipped a cup, poured warm water along the dog's spine, listening to it roll down in thin streams. As he reached for the shampoo, his fingers brushed the old collar still resting around Hunter's neck. Brown leather worn soft with time, buckle slightly tarnished. He paused. Something urged him to look closer. He slid the collar free. The underside was scratched and weathered. Yet there, almost lost beneath years of friction, were faint letters that stilled his breath. Service dog, infant loss, recovery. The words sat cold in his hands, simple but devastating. Jason felt something tighten in his throat, as if the truth had stepped out from a shadow he never knew was there. He looked at Hunter, who lowered his head slightly, as though sensing the shift in the room. Jason didn't speak. The silence itself seemed to ask the questions his voice couldn't form. Why had this dog known fear so quickly? Why had he run to Lily's side before any machine or human could? Why did he tremble every time she coughed? The answers, it seemed, were carved into this piece of leather, carried through a grief no creature should ever have to hold. The next morning, sunlight spilled through thin curtains as Jason drove to the rescue shelter. The small building sat at the edge of town, white paint peeling in places, the sign slightly crooked. Inside, the air smelled of cedar shavings and gentle disinfectant. Behind the counter stood a woman in her mid-40s, shoulder-length brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail, navy t-shirt, and gray khakis dusted with fur. Her name tag read Karen. Her eyes, warm but shadowed, lifted with recognition. Hunter, she breathed softly, stepping around the desk. She knelt to stroke his head, fingers tracing the line between his ears with a tenderness born from old attachment. Her voice was low, steady. I wondered when this day might come. Jason held out the collar. Can you tell me what this means? The question hung heavy in the quiet room. Karen exhaled, long and slow, as if releasing years she had kept sealed behind her ribs. She motioned for Jason to sit. When she began to speak, her voice carried both the fragility of memory and the strength of someone who had learned to bear it. She told him about a young mother, single, exhausted, loving in all the ways she could manage. Her baby had sleep apnea. Hunter had been trained to alert her, to sense the slightest disruption in breath. He was remarkable, Karen said, more sensitive than any dog we'd had. But one night, the mother took a prescribed sedative to help her rest. Hunter sensed danger, something in the baby's gasping, a shift in the air. He had tried everything, nudging, whining, barking, tugging at her sleeve. But she didn't wake. And by dawn, it was too late. Jason stared at the floor, hands clasped, the story pressed against him, heavy and raw. Beside him, Hunter stood very still, as if listening to a memory he had never escaped. Karen continued quietly. After that, he wouldn't leave any child he saw. He watched them like he was begging the world for another chance. Her voice trembled on the last words. Jason closed his eyes, letting the truth settle into him, not in sharp pieces, but in slow, aching waves. This wasn't simple loyalty. It was a wound, carried not with bitterness, but with a kind of devotion that bordered on sacred. Driving home, Jason felt the weight of the collar in his pocket. He didn't put it back on Hunter. Some things, he decided, didn't belong around the neck of a soul still trying to heal. When they reached the house, Lily toddled toward them, arms lifted in greeting. Hunter bowed his head to her, gentle and certain. Jason watched them, feeling something settle in his heart, a promise he hadn't spoken, but one he knew he would keep. He reached down and touched Hunter's shoulder, voice quiet. "You have a home now, and you're not carrying this alone anymore." The room softened into stillness, the evening air filled with fading light, and for the first time in a long while, Hunter's breath eased, not in fear, but in peace. Dawn arrived gently, as if careful not to disturb the house. Pale light slipped across the wooden floor, warm and thin, settling at the doorway of Lily's room like a quiet blessing. For the first time in days, Jason stood still long enough to notice the softness of morning. 34, weary but steadier now, he leaned against the frame, arms folded loosely, the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw catching the gold light. Lily slept curled beneath her blanket, breath steady, cheeks warm with the blush of peaceful dreams. And there, beside her bed, lay Hunter, 5-year-old German shepherd, black and tan coat rising and falling in slow, even breaths. He wasn't tense tonight. His ears, usually lifted toward every small sound, now rested gently along his head. His body seemed to recognize safety at last, as though the house itself had exhaled a long-held worry. Jason watched him with a tenderness he didn't try to hide. The truth he had learned at the shelter, the collar, the child Hunter couldn't save, the grief stitched into the dog's every instinct, had settled somewhere deep in him. Not as a burden, but as a responsibility, and as a bond, a quiet, sacred one. That evening, after dinner, Lily toddled across the rug on unsteady feet. Her blonde hair stuck out in soft wisps, pajamas decorated with tiny stars. She carried a wooden block in one hand, dragging a small blanket in the other. Hunter rose slowly as she approached, lowering his head with the gentleness he seemed to reserve only for children. She wrapped her arms around him, tiny, imperfect, wholehearted. Jason watched from the couch, his breath catching in that simple, wordless moment. For a long time he had felt the weight of raising Lily alone, the late bills, the sleepless nights, the quiet fear of not being enough. Hunter had changed that, not by removing the burden, but by sharing something far heavier, the fear of losing a child. Jason saw it now in the way Hunter stood guard, not with anxiety, but with a vow, a second chance, perhaps for all of them. Later that night, the house fell into its familiar quiet. The faint hum of the heater, the whisper of wind outside, the soft rustle of blankets as Lily settled into sleep. Hunter circled once, then lay down beside her bed. Jason sat on the floor nearby, back against the wall, his knees drawn loosely up. He didn't intend to stay long, just a few minutes to watch them. But time slipped gently around him. At some point, Lily shifted, rolling toward the edge of the mattress. Jason leaned forward, ready to catch her, but he didn't need to. Hunter rose with silent certainty and pressed his body against the bed's side. A living barrier, a soft wall of fur and devotion. Lily's small hand brushed against Hunter's shoulder, and she sighed as though recognizing him even in sleep. Jason felt something break open in him, a small, tender ache he had kept tucked away for years. The kind of ache that whispered, "You're not alone anymore." He lowered his head into his hands for a moment, letting the emotion pass through like a tide. Then he reached out, resting his palm on Hunter's back, the dog's warmth steady beneath his touch. "Thank you," he murmured, voice soft, almost a prayer. "For saving her, for staying, for carrying what you carried, and still choosing to love." Hunter didn't move, but Jason felt the dog breathe, a deep, peaceful breath, different from the anxious ones of the past. It was the breath of someone who had finally found rest. In the quiet room, with a child safe and a dog healing, Jason felt a promise settle into place. A simple one: to protect this fragile peace, to honor the second chances life had handed them, to make sure Hunter would never again bear his grief alone. And as the light dimmed and sleep touched the house, the three of them rested, father, daughter, dog, bound not by fear anymore, but by the silent, enduring grace of being given another chance. In the quiet moments of our own lives, many of us know the weight of loneliness, the ache of aging, and the battles our bodies face each day. But stories like this remind us that love, loyalty, and God's grace still shine through the darkest nights. If this touched your heart, please share it so others feel less alone. Leave a comment, subscribe, and may the Lord watch over you, protect your health, ease your burdens, and fill your days with peace. You are not forgotten. You are loved,